Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in for another Tuesday's Cruiser Chat with Otram. Glad you could make it. No format once again for this evening. Had a lot going on at the shop, working on a custom 80 series bumper for a guy, and had a big scare with it today. It's out in the parking lot because we had to push it out to work on something else. And went to pull the bumper off because it's supposed to rain here this evening. And when I reached up inside the bumper, a snake came out of the bumper, wrapped down my arm, and then went down down through the parking lot. Freaked me out. But yeah, working on that. Started on a 200 series suspension lift today. So messing with that. Got the video for the 200 series suspension shot. So I've just got to edit it this evening. Hopefully I'll get that done after live chat. And I should mention, we started a Patreon page. And basically what it is, if people really like our videos and want to pitch in and help out to making better videos, you can go to that page and lend support. And there's a link down in the description. Kind of like NPR and PBS, where they ask for your donation to to keep up with costs. We really like making videos. We'll keep making videos either way, but they do take away from time that I could be more productive in the shop. So we figured we'd start a Patreon page to help offset some of that. Yeah, and especially since I rolled over on the audio recorder today and smashed it. No real format today, just whatever you guys want to talk about. Hopefully audio and video are coming through well. If not, let me know. For some reason, I can't hear myself when I talk on the headphones, and if I talk on the speakers, it backfeeds through here. So I'm kind of up to having you guys tell me whether audio is working or not. But yeah, so whatever you guys want to talk about, just let me know. I'm trying to think what else we've got. We've got a head gasket on an 80 series going back together. And we've still got to do the brake booster on it. We were going to do it while the head was off and access was better. But I think it was last week on chat, somebody said that they'd be interested in a video on how to do the brake booster on an 80 series. So I figured we'd go ahead and reassemble the head so that the video was actually proper and that you'd have all the things in the way that you normally would. So hopefully Crash will have that running tomorrow and we can actually start filming the video on doing the booster. And thanks, Phil, for letting me know that you guys can hear me. Since I moved chat to the house, I've been playing with different audio setups and camera setups to try to make it sound better, look better here. So I'm never quite sure if the tweaks are working or not. I'm trying to think of what else to talk about. I am kind of brain dead today after fighting the suspension on the 200 series. Messing with the KDSS sway bars on those really takes it out of you. It is not fun getting everything lined back up and moved around, even with the adjuster valves open on those. And it took us 3 or 4 hours just to get the adjuster valves open on this truck. They were seized, rusted shut, broke every 5mm bit, hex bit we had in the shop trying to get them open. Finally broke down to welding nuts onto them so we could actually put a decent sized wrench on and break them free. Because if we couldn't get the adjusters open, then we couldn't do the lift because there'd be no way to level it when we were done. So got those open finally this morning. Spent the better part of yesterday afternoon messing with trying to free them up. Got them open, got the rear suspension done. and probably 3/4 of the front suspension installed this afternoon. I've got enough footage to make the video for the install. I just need to edit it. There's a lot of real struggle in trying to get some of the parts back in, so I'm gonna have to edit it down so you guys don't have to sit through me really struggling to put the upper A-arm bolts back in. Recent rough idle. Question is recent rough idle after having a head gasket on an LX450. There's a couple of things you can look at. I would double check valve clearance. It should have been checked as the head was going back together, but a lot of times it gets overlooked. And if they've got one of the shims out of place, you could have a valve that's a bit off and not sealing properly, and you'd probably feel that more at idle, than under load. Same with fuel injectors. The injectors were out for doing the job. If they got, dirt, anything foreign in them, you could have an injector, or I've seen them just from taking them out, putting them back in, I've seen the injectors go not happy. And depending on how long ago the head gasket was done and how severely it blew prior, how long it was driven with a blown head gasket before the head gasket was fixed, the oxygen sensors may have gotten coated in coolant or coolant/oil. So they may need time to burn off and re-clean themselves, or they could have gotten contaminated. It's hard to say without really digging into it, but my first inclination would be valve clearance, because I've seen that issue most commonly after a recent head gasket. And Phil wants to know if I've ever worked on any Lexus GXs. I have, but not much. Mostly it's just been like preventative maintenance, like the timing belts and things like that. I'm trying to think. I think I did the rear spring conversion on one to get rid of the airbags, but that's been forever ago. But I'm pretty sure I've done that. But most of the work I've done on them has just been timing belts, water pumps, spark plugs, just general maintenance. I haven't really gotten deep into them yet. The vast majority of what we see come through, are Land Cruiser models, and then we get, some Lexuses, like the Lexus smaller, like the GXs. We get, 4Runners through Tacomas, but not near the quantities that we see of Land Cruisers. And I need to write myself a note. Sorry, just thought of something. Was there a specific question you were looking for on the GXs? Because some of the stuff crosses over, so it may not be something that's specific to GX, but we may have worked on it in another fashion. Oh, and I guess the other thing on the LX450, sorry, I'm jumping around, on the LX450 with the rough idle at idle, double check all the vacuum lines. A lot of them that are up under the intake, are hard to see, hard to make sure that you've got back together. And if one of those is off, you could have, a slight vacuum leak, and that might be enough to give you a weird idle. Huh. With new everything, then I would go back to leaning towards valve shims. Although I heard the great the great saying that new stands for never ever worked. So just because it's new doesn't mean it's good. But if it was all OEM, chances are that it's good. But yeah, the valve shims, if they didn't mark them carefully, taking them off or get them back in exactly the right spots, then you could have issues. That's the only thing that's really popping to mind. And the GX common issues, the only thing that's really popping to mind is, regular timing belt maintenance. And we see more than average radiator replacements on those. And I think it's the pink coolant. The pink coolant seems to be really hard on everything. But the GX and Forerunner radiators seem to be really prone to leaking. Not a horrible job to do, and not a horribly expensive radiator, but that's probably the only real common problem we see on them. But granted, we don't see a lot of them. I'm trying to think, if the head was fully serviced, do you know if they did a valve job or if they just pressure tested and decked it? Because I've only ever seen one 80 series head that actually needed the valves done. And that one needed it done because somebody put the shims in wrong while doing a head gasket, and it hung one of the exhaust valves open and burned the exhaust valve out of it. Every one of them otherwise that we've done, the machine shops always reported back that the valve sealed fine, leave them alone, and they would just skim the head to bring it back into spec. But if they did a valve job, it could have thrown all the shims out of whack, and somebody, didn't go back through and double check all the shim thicknesses. But again, that's just another guess. I can't think of really anything else. I mean, possibly EGR, but, I've never seen a high flow problem on a 80 series EGR. It's always been lack of flow, due to the VSVs or something like that. And I wouldn't think that would cause a rough idle. Rear bumper fabrication on the 80 is coming along pretty well. I've been posting progress pictures on our Instagram. It's coming along. I was talking at the very beginning of the chat. We pulled it outside to pull the 200 series suspension in so I could knock it out, and went to pull the rear bumper off to make sure it didn't get rained on tonight. And a snake crawled out of the rear bumper and down my arm, and I about wet my pants. So yeah, but it's coming along. Most of the flesh out is done. Like all the big pieces are built. I just need to go back and do gussets and bracing and the latches, and then just do the final cleanup. Really happy with the way it's coming out. So hopefully a couple more days and I'll have it done. And yeah, if it, it's hard to say if they did the valve job. It's hard to say because valve job can mean different things to different machine shops. And, like I've been using the same machinist for years, and we kind of have an understanding of, unless it needs it, don't touch it. So he does just what's needed to bring the truck back to running properly, and doesn't go any further. it's not super difficult to pop the valve cover back off and recheck the valves. I guess one other thing you could check, since they had the whole wiring harness out while they did the head gasket, double check where the wiring harness curves around the EGR valve. If it's pulled tight, there's a chance it could have melted the harness right there, and you could be shorting out injector wiring. So that's also, I've seen, and I don't know how they got it done, but I've seen the wiring harness put back in differently routed than factory, and it's burned through the harness, burned through the insulation, and melted the injector wiring and caused a misfire. Those, the one I saw like that, it caused a misfire under load, but it could just as easily cause a misfire at idle. And double check ignition timing. I wouldn't think that would give you a problem just at idle, but it's anything's possible. I had an 80 series head gasket years ago, put everything back together, could not get the thing to start. It would turn over, it had fuel, it seemed like it was getting spark, but just could not get the thing to start. And after like hours of troubleshooting, I turned around and saw the distributor rotor was sitting on the workbench behind me. Phil wants to know how the dogs are today. They're good. They were just here in the office pacing around. They went back to the living room to go sleep on the couch. Atticus, the older of the two dogs, had to go get, I guess for the lack of a better word, doggy Advil. He's got some hip issues, but that seems to be helping. But yeah, they're good. Yeah, so I guess you've gone through everything I would probably check. So valves, valves would be the next thing, and hopefully that's it, and hopefully it's an easy fix. If you do end up having to change valve shims around, technically you're supposed to take the camshafts back out to get the shim buckets out, but there is SP Tools makes I forget what they call it. It's like a valve shim tool that lets you press down on the shim buckets and get the shims out without taking the camshafts out. I think I briefly show it in our valve clearance video, but yeah, I've never had to use it, luckily, but I've got it in my toolbox just in case. And it's not horribly expensive if you have to end up changing shims. It's a pretty cheap tool, and I would much rather do that than pull the camshafts out. And if you run into issues between live chats, you can always shoot us an email at the shop. I'm not always super fast at responding to emails. It just depends on what's going on. But I try to get back to folks, in a reasonable amount of time. Especially if it's something they're working on to try to get back together to drive. Do you want to be on TV? Trillian, one of the dogs, is looking at me. Come here. Jump up. Jump up. Can you look over there? Can you jump up? Atticus, can you jump up here? Yeah. Can you look? No, you gotta look over there. You gotta look over there. Oh, don't drive the 8 hours to here. Marshall at Trollhole Cruisers, I believe is in South Carolina, and he does a ton of 80 series too. So I'm sure they could figure it out as well. I mean, I'm not going to discourage anybody from bringing me work. We're probably booked out till mid-December right now for bigger jobs. I really need to get the other half of the shop and get more space so we can work on the backlog of work, because there's only so much we can fit in the 2-bay shop right now. But yeah, if you get desperate, we're here. If you need to bounce ideas off somebody, we're here. But yeah, I'm pretty sure Marshall at Trollhole is a lot closer to you than we are. And the dogs say rough back. And every time when it's coming up time for chat, I keep thinking that I need to make an outline of topics to talk about between comments on here. Okay. Well, then I'm not sure. I've never actually met Marshall, but him and the guys at the shop have always been super helpful when I've called down looking for parts and for other stuff. But yeah, I don't know. What else? The other thing I was going to say, I'm contemplating doing like 2, probably end up being ebooks, like a 80 series buyer's guide / baselining guide / modifications guide. Like one section on everything you should look for, when you're buying an 80, one section on everything to do for catch-up maintenance, and then one section to do for modifications, and then doing the same format book for 100 series. Kind of collecting everything that you've got to look all over the internet for right now, collecting it all into one book. Didn't know if there was any interest in that, because yeah, with everything else I've got going on, I'm not quite sure where I'm going to find the time to write a book or two. But I figure if my wife can write novels, then I should probably give it a shot as well, even though this will be a technical book and not a novel. But yeah, I think she's written 4, so I've got to catch up. So yeah, it's one of those things that's in the pipeline. I'm not sure how soon I'm going to get to it. I've started outlining, but haven't actually started writing. But yeah, and if anybody has any suggestions for something that they would like to see in a guide for buying, baselining, modifying, shoot me an email, shoot me a comment, because I am sure that there's something I will forget to put in there. So yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any other big news. I think next week we're finally going to start cleaning up, painting, and assembling the drivetrain for the 3FE 5-speed swap that's going in the FJ40. I pulled the engine out of the donor 62 probably a month or two ago, and it's been sitting in the middle of the shop, and we've been tripping on it. So we finally got some time in the schedule that I can actually start putting that project together, which will be nice. And I'm sure the owner will be happy to get his cruiser back, because it's been at the shop since the summer, not running, and we just haven't had time to start on it yet. We had like a quick day where we didn't have anything coming in. So we pulled the donor in and pulled the drivetrain out of it real quick. And then we got super swamped again and haven't gotten back to it. Yeah, it's on your head gasket. It's one of those things. I'm sure it's something stupid, and once you find it, you're going to be like, wow, how did this get missed? And maybe it's just going to take a fresh set of eyes, of you looking over it. Because I know, I've run into problems, at the shop, just, and you'll chase your tail troubleshooting something. And then you'll call a buddy at another cruiser shop and you'll be like, hey, have you run across this? And, any ideas on where I can go? And they'll be like, oh, have you checked blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no. And then you go and check whatever it was, and it was something stupidly simple. And that's what the issue was. Oh, and I just thought of another thing. We had an 80 series in. It didn't have a head gasket, but somebody had the wiring harness out for some reason. And they hadn't, the wiring ground, there's like a group of ground cables that goes up to the bottom of the back of the intake. That hadn't gotten bolted back up. And like the mass airflow sensor, the coolant temp sensor, a bunch of the sensors, that's where they got their ground. And it was throwing off all the readings and was making it run super rich. It would just make your eyes water, super rich. And putting that ground back on helped tremendously. Still didn't fix it. And then we took his instrument cluster out to check. He'd put LED bulbs in it. And one of the LED bulbs was like backfeeding through the park neutral switch. Took that out, put a stock bulb in it, put the gauge cluster back in, and it ran great for like a day and then went back to running rough. Pulled the gauge cluster out, unplugged it, plugged it back in, and it's run fine since. No idea what plugging and unplugging the gauges did. But yeah, it was something stupid like that. Like if we didn't know that he had put LED bulbs in it, we would have never gone looking at the gauges. And we pulled the gauges out, put them back in, and it started running better immediately. No idea what fixed the problem. And it's so frustrating because you don't know if you've actually fixed the problem or if you just jiggled something and for now it's working. And we shook the wiring harness and moved everything around, and we couldn't get it to act up again once we'd plugged and unplugged the gauges. But hold on just a sec. Trilly, hush. It's been running fine since. Big Wave Dave wants to know how to check the intake exhaust gasket is cracked or leaking on a 2F motor. The biggest indicator we end up seeing is it won't idle without the choke on. So if you've got a really rough idle without the choke, usually it's a pretty good indicator that you've got a vacuum leak. You can spray around the intake area with starting fluid. And if you've got a vacuum leak, it'll suck the starting fluid in through there and rev the engine. You just have to be real careful with doing that because starting fluid's flammable. And if you get puddles of it places, it's real easy to start a fire. But just spritzing it around is, it's a pretty good indicator of a vacuum leak. We use a smoke machine at the shop, which puts pressurized smoke into the intake. And then you just watch to see where the smoke comes out. That doesn't always catch them, though, but the starter fluid trick almost always catches them. And backfire on decel. Yeah, and I'm terrible at like over the phone, over the internet diagnosing carbs. It's kind of one of those things. Yes, propane is much safer than starting fluid. And I should have mentioned that. Thank you. We technically do have the propane wand for doing that. I just never use it because I always use the smoke machine. But yes, it is much safer to use propane. But yeah, what I was saying, I'm bad at like diagnosing them from afar. It's more one of those, like when I'm driving it or messing with it, it's like a seat of the pants kind of feel. Where it's like, oh, I think it might be blah, blah, blah. Also check your ignition timing. Check your base timing, and then check that when you rev the engine, that the advance actually changes. Because it could be that your ignition advance is stuck, and if it's advancing and then it's staying advanced when you decel, I could see that causing a misfire. More likely intake leak, but I wouldn't rule out ignition timing as well. We've got a 40 at the shop right now. We put a new which one, brain dead? The graphite Remflex. We just put a new Remflex intake and exhaust manifold gasket in it, torqued everything, cleaned everything up. It's got a new troll hole carb, and we did it all because his old carb, when you adjusted the idle mix screw, nothing happened. You could unplug the idle solenoid and nothing happened. So we put the new carb on, and now you can adjust the idle mixture, and the idle mix or the idle cut solenoid does something, but we still can't get it to run quite right. It's got a bog and a backfire. And I'm leaning towards it being ignition, but I haven't really gotten back into digging into it to double check. And how do you test the other VSV on a 97, not the EGR VSV? And I'm pretty sure that's the EVAP canister VSV. And I have never had to check that one. The down and dirty for any of the VSVs is you just give them power and ground and try to blow through them. And depending on the way, depending on which way the VSV goes, some of them are closed with power and some of them are open with power. But, just blow through it, give power to it, see if it changes. If nothing changes, then you probably don't have a working VSV. So that's the down and dirty. I'm sure there's a much more comprehensive test in the factory service manual, but I don't have access to it from here at the house. But yeah, and I didn't see a link pop up. But yeah, if you shoot me a link, I will, I'll take a look at it once chat's over. Or also, if you tag me in it, it'll pop up in my mud alerts to tell me to go look at it. Either way. What are you doing? If you're running a header, there's a really good chance that your header and your intake aren't the same thickness. And when you tighten up the intake and exhaust bolts, you're tightening either the intake or the exhaust, because they're not the same thickness, and the washer is sitting crooked. So the old school fix is to cut some washers in half and stick them on whichever is the skinnier half of the junction, so that you get an even tightening. The one we're chasing around at the shop also has a header, and it's been tightened crooked enough before that it's started to crack the ears on the intake manifold. And yeah, shoot me an email and with a link, and I'll check it out. But yeah, I hate dealing with trying to chase header vacuum leaks with vacuum leaks with trucks with headers. Usually, if you don't have the insulator, like the big insulator on top of the intake, you can look down at the junction between the head, the intake, and the exhaust. And a lot of times you'll see that either the intake or the exhaust, one flange is thicker than the other, and that the washers are sitting crooked. And usually you'll see staining for a leak, on whichever one is the skinnier, because it's not getting proper torque. And we use the Remflex gaskets because they're a lot thicker, and they'll crush and take up some of the difference. They're not a cure-all if the header thickness is way off from the intake, but they do help, and we've had a much better success rate with them. The one we just took off, it had like 2 stock style gaskets glued together to try to make up enough thickness in gasket to cure the leak. But since it was 2 metal bonded gaskets, they wouldn't compress enough, where the Remflex is soft and squishes more until it gets baked in. Yep, Remflex. Guys, can you go in the living room? Can you go sit on your couch? Go sit on your couch. Come on, go. You're a good boy, go sit on your couch. No problem. The other thing you could do is hook up a vacuum gauge and see if you're getting an abnormally low vacuum reading. Most of the time on a good running 2F, we see between like 17 and 21 inches of vacuum. If you're dipping down below like 15, 14, 13 in there, you've either got a vacuum leak or some other sealing condition that's keeping you from getting good vacuum. So that can be a quick and dirty way to tell what's going on. And you want a fairly smooth needle. You don't want it like flicking and bouncing all around. Yeah, I'm also bad. I cheat. We've got an air-fuel ratio meter at the shop. So if I get stumped on backfires and carb issues, I hook up the wideband air-fuel meter and actually check to see what the fuel ratio is. And then you can really quickly see if you're lean, rich, if you're going lean under idle, if you're going lean under throttle. So it's hard to, how much play is too much play at the pumpkin. So when you grab the pinion, rotationally, you're going to have some because the backlash in the gears, but you shouldn't be able to shake the pinion up and down or in and out. Any amount of up and down or in and out is too much. Rotational, how much is too much depends on gear ratio and a lot of other things, and it's kind of like a gut feeling. But any up and down or in and out is too much, and your pinion bearings are gone. And no problem. Glad you guys are enjoying chat. It's fun for me. My wife has rehearsals at work on Tuesday nights, so I'm here home alone anyway. So I would either be here doing chats or watching videos on YouTube. So it's fun to try and be helpful. I may not always have the answers, but nobody does. Oh, front knuckles are so much fun. We do way too many knuckle jobs at the shop. I don't even want to know how many sets of knuckles I've done over the years. And don't judge the knuckle video series too harshly. That was the very first videos we ever shot. Yeah. I'm still not great at doing videos, but those were the first and are really rough. Yeah, we usually, like pretty much all the rebuild kits we get, be it knuckle, transmission, transfer case, differential, we've been using everything from Terrain Tamer lately. We get them from Cruiser Brothers out in California. They are super awesome to deal with. Super great guys, super knowledgeable, super helpful when you run into stump view problems. Yeah, and they ship quick. I love dealing with them. I need to order some more of the factory Burfield grease from Beano. I really liked that grease, and I keep forgetting to order more. It depends on the condition of your old shims. A lot of times, if the shims aren't super crusty or chewed up from, like the arms being chiseled off, most of the time we reuse them. If they're really chewed up, I'll mic them and match up a same thickness set out of the new shims. But most of the time we reuse the old ones, because they worked with the old knuckle. They'll work with the new knuckle. Now, if you've got a leaking knuckle that's been into before and you don't know if the shims were put back in the proper place the last time the knuckle was done, then you're best to actually go through the procedure with the knuckle centering tool and recalculate the shim thicknesses that way. And then the knuckle's centered, the preload's right, and theoretically you'll be much less likely to leak. Using the Marlin interaxle seals gives you a little bit of play, to be off because they've got more flex in them than the factory one. But we try to get them centered. We use a wire brush. Wire brush on the knuckleball. Yeah, you can use it with a drill. We've got a little right angle cordless drill with a wire cut brush on it that we get in there. Spray it down with brake clean. Scrub the big chunks off with just a hand brush. And then we'll get in there with either the drill with the wire brush or some red Scotch-Brite pads and clean the ball up. It doesn't have to be perfectly spotless. We try to get all the dirt and crud and old grease off, and all the big rust pits. But you're not going to get all this. It's not going to be perfectly shiny and clean. And as soon as it's out in the weather and the knuckles run over it again, it's going to get dirty again. So as long as it's most of the way clean, you're good to go. You just don't want any residual crap on there that's going to fall into the now clean knuckle when you reassemble everything. We don't. As soon as you start steering again, it's gonna wipe the paint off. So we don't paint them. If the backing plates and the knuckle housing themselves are in rough shape, we'll paint those. But we don't always paint them. And yeah, we're spoiled. We've got the big industrial automatic parts washer that cleans everything spotless. To do it at home, your money well spent to go to like Tractor Supply, Harbor Freight, something like that, and get a small parts washer and the solvent for that. But that also means that you've got to have someplace to store a parts washer with 5 gallons of solvent in it. So if that's not the case, you can always get like a metal tub or bucket or something and buy just the parts washer solvent and use that. You could also use something like Purple Power and water. It's going to take a lot longer. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is to get all the big stuff, all the chunks of baked on grime and crustiness and the majority of the grease scooped out from the inside. Get it as clean as you can before you start soaking it to give whatever you're soaking it in a better chance to actually penetrate the really baked on nasty stuff. But yeah, I mean, but parts, even a solvent tank parts washer, that's going to be great. Growing up, we used gasoline or kerosene, but I won't recommend that because neither of those is good for your health, and both of those is fairly flammable. Not the kerosene as much as the gasoline, but yeah, neither of them's great for your health. Even the solvent tanks, the stuff that's in there is nasty. You're going to want a respirator. You're going to want rubber gloves. That's a big reason why we switched over to water-based cleaning. Was just to have one less solvent leaching into our bodies. It's not a fun job, but it's not terrible. Lots and lots of blue shop towels are your friend, and lots of rubber gloves. And we get their orange nitrile gloves that we buy off Amazon, and I can't remember the brand name. But they seem to hold up really well. Or like the Black Raven gloves that you can get at the parts store. Those hold up decently. You don't want like a thin latex glove because it's just going to tear while you're cleaning everything. But yeah, be safe. Protect your skin from the solvents. It may not bother you now, but it's leaching in and will give you neurological damage. I want to say the ones we use are 5 mil. Actually, I will pull them up. Just 1 second. Wow, really struggling with collecting or highlighting just the right part for copy and paste. These are the ones we use. Oh, they're 8 mil. I thought they were thinner than that. They don't feel super thick. But it's funny, like Crash wears the same pair of gloves all day long. And sometimes he can wear them for multiple days. And I don't know what it is. I get about an hour or two, maybe 3 hours out of a set of these. But like the cheaper gloves, I get like 15, 20 minutes. So I feel like they're a lot more durable than regular. We've had really good luck with them. We get them off Amazon. And that reminds me, I should put a link to them on the website where I put the tool list for the knuckles. I've never tried the Harbor Freight ones. The black ones are SAS Ravens. I don't like them as much as the Gloveworks ones. Those are so we use the black ones when we forget to order the ones from Amazon and we run out of gloves and we need some right then and there, and all the parts stores locally carry the SAS Ravens. So that's my backup because I can get them quick. And they do hold up fairly well. They hold up better than average. Yeah, we go through a lot of gloves because cruisers are greasy, nasty to work on. For like around the shop work, like fabricating gloves, I really like I think they're Black Stallion tool hands. They're super cheap, super comfortable, and they hold up fairly well. I caught a pair of mine on fire last week, so I need to order another set. But I've had really good luck with them. We use the seal that comes in the Train Tamer kit, which is an NOK. And the NOK is the factory supplier for a lot of the Toyota seals. So it likely is the same seal that you'll get at Toyota. We've never had a problem with the kit, the Train Tamer kit seals leaking. So, yeah, I've had really good luck with them. I keep some Toyota seals in stock, just in case I bugger one of the terrain tamers driving it in, which is more common than I'd like to admit. Yeah, the Marlin crawler seals, and I don't know if they've changed it, from what used to be the common wisdom was they were great for like 40, 60, mini truck, 4Runner, the part-time four-wheel drive, where the front axle wasn't always spinning. But on the 80 series, they didn't last as long under the full-time four-wheel drive. So for the 80 series, most of the time we use a stock style seal. But we'll use the Marlin if somebody asks for it. I haven't seen them leak more than others. And in the older stuff, they seem to do a better job of taking care of centering issues. So if your shim centering's not quite spot on, the Marlin crawler seals seem to do a better job of taking care of that. The 80 series, you don't have to worry about the knuckle centering because it's taken care of in the machining. So I feel fine using, a factory or factory style seal there. I would not. I wouldn't drill out the plug and install a grease fitting. And my thinking on this is the grease shouldn't really be going anywhere. You pack it, you fill the knuckle up with grease when you service the burr field, and you put it together. And it should be good until the next time the burr fields need serviced. If you're losing grease to the extent that you would need to have a grease fitting to install more grease, then you've got issues beyond just needing to add more grease. So, you really need to go back into the knuckle anyway, in which case you're going to just hand pack it. I'm sure there's other people that will contradict that, and they probably have very good reasons. But, I've always been under the theory that you pack it properly when you pack it, and that's good to go. If you put a grease fitting, it would be real easy to over grease the knuckle, and then you've got grease coming out through the wipers and grease pushing out through the spindle, through the wheel bearings, and out that way. So I would shy away from it. I am not sure about getting that grease from Toyota. My local guys couldn't get it. I believe Beano straight imported it. What we normally use at the parts stores in the grease section, it'll be labeled Ford, Lincoln, Mercury, Molly grease. And it's Valvoline brand. That's the easiest to come by, good quality Molly grease. We use that when we're in a pinch, or I forget to order it in the 5-gallon bucket. I try to keep a 5-gallon bucket, and we get it. It's Mag Power, and I can't remember who the manufacturer is. I'm not sure about Cat. You want a CV rated high moly grease, and the moly is the important part because that's what's giving you the high or the extreme pressure lubrication. Liqui-Moly also makes a really nice Burfield grease. It's called Langzeit Fett, long time fat in German. It's really super nice, and that's what we used for the longest time. But my buddy that was a dealer for Liqui-Moly changed jobs, and now I don't have easy access to it. But that stuff was really nice. I think the factory Toyota stuff was nicer, but the Liqui was really close. But yeah, you want a good black moly grease. No problem. And if you guys don't mind, I'm gonna go ahead and jump off of here so I can feed the dogs dinner. They know we're closing on 7 o'clock, and that's their dinner time, so they're pacing behind me here. But yeah, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And I just looked down and I realized I totally forgot to put the Patreon link in the description on this one. So I'll go ahead and put that down there for future viewers. But yeah, hope you guys found this enjoyable. I'll see you next Tuesday and come back with more questions. So I'll talk to you later. Thanks.